What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to talk about Hotfix 2.5.2 and which weapons you should look out for in PvP following the changes. So this is going to be based off what we know right now. Of course, full patch notes will land with the update on Tuesday, so I'll be sure to cover what we learn. For now though, these are the weapons which I think will be worth testing out next week. So for primary weapons, let's talk about pulse rifles. Firstly, the Clever Dragon Grasp of Malak archetype are having their rate of fire dropped by 7.7%, which is roughly equivalent to 1 frame. This is going to change their time to kill very slightly, and coupled with the changes to Pulse Rifle Flinch, also it's worth remembering that in the case of Grasp or Clever Dragon, many of the super high stability rolls with braced frame and things like that will have a magazine decrease, so generally people will have to use either lower stability rolls or just live with 18 rounds if they have braced frame. Either way, this is going to open up the category again, and I think we'll see a wider variety of pulse rifles. Just yesterday I posted some gameplay of the Hopscotch Pilgrim. This archetype is certainly going to be in a better place for PvP, and that's not because it's receiving changes, but because of other things which are being changed around it. I think the key players here are potentially going to be Hopscotch Pilgrim and Nerwin's Mercy. Both of these are absolutely stellar weapons in their class in terms of stats and stuff like that, and I can see them standing out at least a little more in PvP. We also have things like Red Death in this archetype, which will likely be in a slightly better position, but unless they address the stability and range drop off, then I don't really see it popping up a lot more in PvP. One archetype that is being buffed though is the slow rate of fire and high impact pulse rifles, so things like the Messenger or Spare Change, even Parthian Shot. These are seeing a rate of fire increase of 5.3%, which I think will certainly help to a degree. It's hard to say for sure, but it's always been a fine line with this archetype between it being godly and not really being very good at all, so we'll have to wait and see on this front, but potentially these could be pretty potent. Good year 2 examples would be Spare Change and Parthian Shot, like I said. We also have things like the Messenger from year 1, which I'll absolutely be trying out. It's going to be really interesting to see how these weapons feel. So the one pulse rifle archetype that I've missed out here is the trusty Hawksaw or PDX45 type. Now if we remember back to the beginning of year 2, these things kind of rose to power in the primary meta, and then over time they've kind of been conquered by the highest rate of fire pulse rifles, especially things like Clever Dragon when that entered the scene. However, they are still really strong in PvP, and like with the other types of pulse rifles, they're certainly going to benefit from the changes coming to other weapons. So while we can speculate about how 66 or 59 rate of fire pulse rifles will fit in, it's pretty clear that Hawksaw, PDX, even Aegis of the Reef or Outbreak Prime are going to feel a lot better, and for me, if the low rate of fire pulses don't become the dominant thing, then I think that this class could be about as good as it gets as far as pulse rifles go. Moving on though, let's briefly mention scout rifles. Most of them feel pretty well placed in the game, for me at least, and much like the pulse rifle groups we mentioned, scout rifles are likely to feel a little bit better across the board with the changes to pulse rifles, which of course is a pretty big deal since pulse rifles are the most heavily used primary right now. There's a little bit more to talk about with auto rifles though, so they're having their critical damage modifier increased from 1.25 to 1.3, which is a relatively small amount, but will certainly affect performance. The idea being that if you hit your headshots, you'll be rewarded. So considering the other changes inbound, I think this is going to help auto rifles, but Bungie also referred to a change in base damage to low rate of fire auto rifles. We don't know what the numbers are just yet, but it's certainly going to be worth testing out things like Suros Regime and Genesis Chain from Wrath of the Machine, which is actually a surprisingly effective weapon right now. But as well, when you couple the headshot multiplier damage, I think the max rate of fire auto rifles like Doctrine will still feel pretty decent in the game, but the 88 rate of fire auto rifles like Hakon's Hatchet or even Zalo's Supercell will be well worth trying out. On the whole, I don't think that we're going to see auto rifle popularity like we did at the start of the game, and it's not purely about damage numbers either, because, you know, the game plays differently. Players are more intelligent to the mechanics of the game, and higher damage burst or semi-automatic weapons, even hand cannons, are just better suited to the way that the game works. But for auto rifles in general, they're not very likely to become godly. They may, however, finally have an improved position in the meta game. Moving on to hand cannons, I think this will be an interesting one. They are significantly increasing first shot accuracy, but they're also reducing base range by 5 meters and reducing ranged damage down to 33% of your maximum potential damage via range drop off. It feels like this is absolutely going to change the state of hand cannons in some way, but it's hard to get a picture of what precisely will happen. In close range, hand cannons are going to be pretty effective, but depending on how the range changes affect the playstyle or possibly even change the importance of range perks and things like that, I'm not sure that what's good now is actually going to change. It seems likely that IS Luna and Palindrome and the other popular hand cannons will remain to be the best in class. I had kind of hoped that they could bring range importance down a little bit, maybe, make different types of hand cannons perform closer to each other, but perhaps in its own way this change will do that. Initial accuracy is certainly going to make these things very snappy and sticky, but we'll have to see how they perform in general. So let's talk about special weapons. I'll briefly touch on shotguns. I think the Matador type is still likely to be the best around, but with the special changes we could see more stuff like Invective, especially since less players will have ammo for those higher range shotguns. And I'd also say that if shotguns remain popular in upper tier PvP, then perks like Rangefinder may become somewhat unpopular because it's going to increase ADS times by 25%, which is pretty hefty when you couple it with the accuracy changes that they're seeing in general. There's potentially a lot more inaccuracy and downtime when aiming the weapon and acquisiting the target if you have perks like Rangefinder, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But really I'm more interested in other special weapons in this patch. So with snipers and fusion rifles, I don't really feel that great about what's happening. Fusion rifles are very strong performers in the right hands, and despite the issues with snipers you can pretty much say the same for those, but the lack of special ammo however is going to feel a bit jarring for both of these weapons in particular. I will say though that if shotguns are noticeably less effective than they are now, then I think the special change will be pretty balanced in terms of the potential to get kills while you have special ammo. I just don't think that snipers need to suffer any more than they do, and it would be a shame to see fusion rifles lose the popularity that they've gained over the past few months. So on that front we'll have to see again what happens, but the big one is sidearms. So these things are always going to spawn with special ammo just like they do now, no matter what, and for me I think this is going to be very noticeable. I feel like having a sidearm that nearly always has ammo is going to be way better than having a shotgun but with no ammo. And that kind of sounds pretty dumb, but when you think about it I think you'll see what I mean. I can see myself opting for sidearms nearly all of the time personally. They're in a pretty good place in the game and their main competitors are either being nerfed or are way less likely to have ammo in a lot of engagements. So my focus is really going to be on the primary game but with a sidearm in tow, so if anybody gets too excitable with their newly acquired special, well, sidearms are very effective when people rush you. So I'm kind of excited about this, to be honest. I think we'll see lots of no-land sidearm usage, but to summarize the changes in general, these are the things I'm going to be testing out off the bat on Tuesday. So low rate of fire pulse rifles, spare change, Parthian shot, all of that stuff. I want to see how they perform. There's a potentially big change there. Also, Hopscotch Pilgrim and Nerwin's Mercy, these are going to feel a lot better than they currently do in my opinion, which is definitely welcomed. Up next though, hand cannons. I want to see how IS Luna feels, but I also want to compare that with a much lower range hand cannon, maybe something like the Devil You Know with stability as opposed to range, just to see how it compares at range after the changes and up close and things like that. For auto rifles, the Vision Stone and Hakon's Hatchet archetype have a pretty good time to kill right now, but they tend to get outgunned, so the crit modifier change could make a pretty big difference here, but mainly low rate of fire auto rifles like Suras Regime. I'm really interested to see how they perform as well. Outside of that though, I'm going to see how my best shotguns feel after the change, and I'll likely spend some time messing around with things like Invective and see what other players are using as well. Otherwise, I'll absolutely be running a lot of sidearms because I've got some pretty awesome rolls and I'm kind of excited about that. So there you go guys, just my brief kind of thought process about what's coming in, what I'm expecting to potentially be good. Definitely some things that we're going to have to look into and see how they perform after this patch. It's going to be nice to have changes. I know some of the stuff is kind of controversial, some of it isn't necessarily the most in touch kind of approach to, you know, what's going on in the game right now. I totally get that, but the one thing I am happy about is that we just get something different, we get something fresh. That's going to be a lot of fun. So let me know down below, what are you looking forward to trying out the most after the patch next week? If you have enjoyed this video, a like as always is appreciated. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit subscribe for a lot more Destiny content. I will keep you guys posted on when the patch goes live next week. For now though, thanks a lot for watching the video guys. You have an awesome day.